All right, let's dive into this Predictably Irrational by Ariely.
Sounds good.
Really interesting book you sent us this time, all about how we make decisions and how we aren't really as rational as we maybe think.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Ariely is how he uses like real experiments to show how predictable these irrationalities can be.
Yeah,
So we can kind of spot them and maybe even outsmart them.
that's a good point. So, how do we even begin to unpack all this?
Well, Ariely starts off by talking about some of the external forces that kind of nudge us towards irrationality.
Okay.
And one of the big ones he talks about is the relativity trap.
Okay, so what is that?
It boils down to how we compare things
Hmm.
and how that can really mess with our judgment, especially when it comes to prices.
So it's not just about getting a good deal, it's how that deal looks compared to other deals.
It's all about the comparison.
Mm.
He uses that classic example of buying a TV.
Right.
Like imagine there are three options, a small one for a low price,
Mm-hmm.
a medium one for a mid-range price, and then a large one for a high price.
Okay, yeah, I think I know where you're going with this. The medium one starts to look pretty good, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not because the medium TV is like objectively the best choice.
Hmm.
It's because that smaller, cheaper TV is acting as what Ariely calls a decoy.
Interesting.
So it makes that medium one seem much more attractive by comparison,
Yeah, okay.
even if you might not have chosen it if it was just on its own.
So we're not really evaluating each TV individually. We're letting these comparisons kind of trick us.
Yeah. You're letting the comparison cloud your judgment.
Hmm.
And that's why he calls it a trap.
Right.
We kind of fall into it without even realizing what's happening. And it's not just about shopping either.
Okay, where else does this come into play?
This whole comparison game,
Hmm.
it comes up all the time. Like, think about our salaries.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, you get a raise, you're super happy, and then you find out that like a new coworker is making the same amount.
Ugh. Yeah, I've been there. Doesn't feel so good anymore.
Exactly. Suddenly that raise doesn't seem as great, right?
Yeah.
It's all relative. You know, we're constantly using other people as benchmarks,
Mm-hmm.
whether we're conscious of it or not. And you can almost like manipulate your own happiness that way
Okay.
if you're aware of who you're comparing yourself to.
So we're comparing ourselves to each other, but the market also plays a role in how we perceive things, right?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the ways Ariely talks about how that happens?
Yeah, well, he talks a lot about how marketers use all these clever tricks to tap into our, irrational tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most fascinating examples, I think, is the story of how black pearls became like a luxury item.
Yeah, didn't they used to be basically worthless?
Exactly. And then this one savvy jeweler came along
Hmm.
and figured out how to make people desire them.
Interesting.
What he did was he displayed them alongside diamonds and like other really precious gems
Okay.
and priced them ridiculously high.
So he was creating an association in people's minds, like black pearls equals luxury equals exclusivity.
Exactly. He was manufacturing this perception of value. You know, like if you have to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it.
Yeah.
It kind of works that way.
It does. It's crazy.
Yeah. And what this shows us is how susceptible we are to these like external cues.
Hmm.
You know, we're not always judging things based on like their inherent worth,
Right.
but it's all about like how they're presented, the story around them. It all plays a role.
It really is like we're all just playing this big game of perception versus reality.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Mm.
And to make better choices, we kind of have to learn to see through the, smoke and mirrors.
Okay, so the market can manipulate us, but what about when we're just dealing with each other on a personal level?
Mm.
Ariely also talks about those social norms versus market norms, right?
Does. And what's so interesting there is that we're constantly navigating these two worlds.
Hmm.
Social norms, which are all about favors and helping out,
Right.
and then market norms, which are more like transactional,
Uh-huh.
clear exchange of value.
Okay, so where do these norms kind of clash in the real world?
Well, think about it this way. Like, what would happen if you offered to pay your mother-in-law a couple $100 for cooking Thanksgiving dinner?
Oh, yeah. Big mistake.
It would feel so weird,
What?
right? Like you're applying market norms to a situation that's governed by social norms.
Yeah.
Now, this gets awkward, right?
Totally. But Ariely also suggests that bringing some of those social norms into the workplace can actually be a good thing.
He does.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like when you feel valued and appreciated by your colleagues
Right.
and there's a sense of community, it just makes for a more motivating environment.
Yeah, so it's not all about just salary and bonuses.
Yeah.
It's about actually enjoying where you work and who you work with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that we're not always driven by purely like logical or economic motives.
Right.
Our emotions, our connections, the context, it all plays a role.
So we've covered the external forces. What about some of the internal factors, like the psychological reasons why we make irrational decisions?
He dives into that too, and it gets even more interesting.
Okay, so fill me in. What are those internal factors?
One of the big ones is this idea of the hot state,
Okay.
which is basically when our emotions are running high. Like when we're angry or excited or even just really stressed out.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
We all have. And he did a study on this, actually, focusing on people's willingness to make like risky decisions about sex when they were in a cold state versus when they were aroused.
And I'm guessing that they were a lot more likely to make those risky decisions when they were aroused.
Exactly, yeah. Their judgment was clouded by that emotional state.
Yeah.
And they were more likely to make decisions that they later regretted.
So strong emotions are not the time to make big decisions.
Not the best time.
Okay. What else do we need to watch out for?
Well, there's our good old friend, lack of self-control.
Oh, yeah.
Ariely talks a lot about procrastination, how we struggle to resist temptation, even when we know it's not good for us.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that struggle.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
It's interesting because he found that just simply giving people deadlines for their work actually improved their performance.
Yeah. So a little bit of external pressure helps.
It does, yeah.
Interesting.
Like it forces you to act instead
Right.
of putting things off.
Okay.
He even came up with this idea for a self-control credit card that would like limit spending in certain categories.
Oh, that's clever. But I don't think the banks would like that very much.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
But it's a good example of how we can like use creative strategies to outsmart ourselves a little bit.
Okay, so we've got strong emotions, we've got a lack of self-control. What else is working against us here?
Well, there's this interesting phenomenon that Ariely calls the feeling of ownership.
What is that?
It basically means that we tend to overvalue things that we already possess.
Okay, so like I'm way more attached to that wobbly bookshelf that I built myself than I would be if I just bought it pre-assembled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He calls that the IKEA effect. And it all ties into this idea of loss aversion, which means that, we feel the pain of a loss like twice as strongly as the pleasure of a gain.
So once we have something, we just really don't want to let it go.
Right. Even if it's not that great to begin with.
So basically, we're irrational because we compare things, we're susceptible to marketing ploys, we get swayed by our emotions, we lack self-control, and we overvalue what we own.
It's a lot to work against.
It is. Is there any hope for us?
There is. That's what we're going to explore next.
Okay, good.
Ariely doesn't just point out our flaws. He actually offers ways we can overcome these tendencies.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little better. I was starting to feel a little hopeless there for a minute.
I get it.
Okay, I'm ready to hear what he has to say.
So, ready to start outsmarting yourself?
Yes. Please give me all the tips.
All right, well, one of the things Ariely talks about is this idea of like looking beneath the surface. Don't take things at face value, but really question your assumptions.
So, like, don't assume a higher price means better quality.
Exactly. Or that something that's popular is automatically the best.
Yeah.
He talks about that experiment with Coke and Pepsi.
Oh, yeah.
And how most people can't actually tell the difference in blind taste tests.
Right.
But when they know they're drinking Coke, their brain, like, lights up.
Really?
In the areas associated with reward and pleasure.
So even if I don't actually like Coke better, my brain is telling me I do just because of the brand.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It shows you how powerful branding can be.
Yeah.
We're primed to enjoy it more just because of what we believe about it.
So it's like those black pearls all over again? It's not about the actual product. It's the story we tell ourselves about it.
It's the perception of value.
Yeah.
And that's true for so many things.
Okay. So how do we actually look beneath the surface?
Well, one thing is to really focus on the functionality of something. Like instead of just the image or the status.
So instead of buying those designer jeans because they're cool,
Right.
I should be asking myself, do I need new jeans?
Exactly. Do they actually fit well? Will they last?
Right. It's about what I need, not what everyone else thinks I need.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Well, another big thing Ariely emphasizes is honesty.
Okay.
Which might sound simple, but it's actually really powerful.
Yeah.
We're all capable of dishonesty.
Yeah, especially when we think we can get away with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like those little white lies we tell
Oh, no, the
ourselves.
queen of white lies.
Like, I'll start my diet tomorrow,
yeah.
or I'll definitely go to the gym later this week,
Cool.
or maybe fudge a few numbers on your taxes or
Maybe
something.
not that.
But, those small acts of dishonesty,
Right.
they can kind of have a ripple effect.
So it's like a slippery slope.
Ariely argues that it can really erode our sense of integrity,
Right.
and it makes it easier to justify bigger transgressions later on.
Okay, so how do we become more honest?
It starts with awareness. If we can just acknowledge that tendency in ourselves, we're more likely to resist it.
So check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Exactly. And be mindful of those justifications we make.
Hmm.
Are we being honest with ourselves or just trying to feel better about a bad choice?
It's a tough question to ask sometimes.
It is, but it's an important one.
This is all so interesting. I really am seeing the world in a whole new way.
It's pretty eye-opening, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what I like about Ariely is he doesn't present it in this, dry academic way.
Yeah, he's really engaging.
He uses real-world examples, experiments.
Right, like that Hershey's Kisses experiment.
Exactly. Like, who knew free chocolate could teach us so much?
And so we're not just learning why we're irrational,
Right.
but we're also learning what we can do about it.
Exactly. It's about those practical takeaways.
So we're not doomed to repeat the same mistakes.
Not at all. That's good to hear. It's about recognizing those patterns and then developing strategies to counter them.
I like that it's not about being perfectly rational.
Right.
It's about working with what we've got.
Exactly. Sometimes you might even use a little irrationality to your advantage.
Like our friend, the Black Pearl salesman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about being conscious and intentional.
This has been awesome. I feel like I have so many new tools to work with now.
It's been a pleasure diving into this with you.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
I'm sure our listener is feeling the same way. So now that we've unpacked all of this, what are the key takeaways? What can our listener actually do with this information? So we've talked about all the reasons why we're so irrational, but how do we actually use this information to make better decisions?
Well, like we said before, just by understanding these patterns, we're already ahead of the game.
Right. Awareness is key.
Yeah. Once you see those biases, you can start making more conscious choices.
It's like knowing what you're up against.
Exactly.
So if I know I always fall for that decoy effect, I can watch out for it when I'm shopping.
Yeah. Take a step back. Look at each option individually.
And for those of us who struggle with self-control, Ariely's pre-commitment strategies could be helpful.
Definitely. Setting deadlines, asking a friend to hold you accountable.
Those are good.
Find what works for you. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
The point is we have more control than we think.
And maybe we can even use a little irrationality to our advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that jeweler with the black pearls.
Exactly.
We don't have to be totally rational robots.
It's about understanding those forces.
Right.
And then figuring out how to navigate them.
This has been so eye-opening.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
We've learned about the traps, the power of free E, those sneaky mental tricks.
But we can outsmart them.
We don't have to let them control us.
We can make more conscious choices.
So the next time you're making a decision, big or small,
Pre-commit it.
think about what we've talked about.
Ask yourself, am I being rational here?
With a little awareness and some good strategies, you might be surprised how much better you feel.
It's all about taking control.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Predictably Irrational.
It's been fun.
We'll see you next time.